talk about how the Auslan training package was established. Discussion started around 2012. The reason for this was because the community identified, two things were happening. Up until that point, the Victorian government owned the Auslan curriculum as it was known then. That was a very simple curriculum that was developed sometime back in the 1990s, and it had been modified over time and sat under the Victorian government. There was a growing awareness of the need for something standardised and national. Even though each state could make modifications, a national approach was needed. At the same time, in the Australian training system, many different qualifications and training courses were becoming more alike and national. The reason for this is that if I'm an electrician and trained in Victoria, the skills required in New South Wales might be different. So we needed to have a national training packages that include all states. So we realised we needed to have the same process for Auslan. There was an argument about whether Auslan was appropriate for a training package because it's a language, not skills-based training or a set of competencies. But to be taught in TAFE, you need a training package. It's a requirement. So we had to accept that and follow the established system. At the time, I was the contract manager for the Auslan program at Melbourne Polytechnic under my role in Deaf Connected. Deaf Connected at that time sat within Melbourne Polytechnic, but it was funded by a separate contract. That meant Deaf Connected wasn't under the full control of Melbourne Polytechnic like other training departments in Melbourne Polytechnic. We were a little different because of the history of how Deaf Connected had developed. That meant Deaf Connected could work on establishing an Auslan training package and be recognised as a community representative of the deaf community, not a training organisation, because of the different arrangements. That means I could go to discuss and document the needs of the community. Those documented needs meant we could lobby the Commonwealth Government, who looked after the national training system under the Department of Employment, Skills and Education. They were DESE at that time, but the name may have changed since then. I think they are now DEWR, the Department of Education and Workplace Relations, but I'm sure you will do your research through the course. But at that time, it was the DESE. So we lobbied the government over quite some time until we found the right person. At the same time, we established a relationship with a skills service organisation called Skills IQ. Skills IQ also lobbied the Commonwealth, which meant the government accepted they had to do something. After some deliberation, the government contacted Skills IQ about starting the review and consulting process that required. Skills IQ accepted the request and the Commonwealth funded them to start the independent consultation. Part of the consultation by the SSO, Skills IQ, was the establishment of the Auslan Training Reference Group, ATRG. The reference group was set up because Skills IQ didn't have any experience or knowledge of Auslan. At the same time, Skills IQ had an industry reference group, IRG. All training packages have an industry group. For example, electrical, plumbing, warehousing, transport, and many others. Usually they include employers, unions, community representatives, and industry experts. But the IRG under Skills IQ didn't know anything about Auslan. So Skills IQ decided that because we already had an interpret and translating training package in the PSP area, Auslan would also sit in this area. That was a decision made by others. We had no control over that decision. Some people may wonder why PSB, but where it sits was a decision made by others. We had no control over that. But because the IRG didn't know anything about Auslan, they agreed for us to set up the Auslan Training Reference Group with experts from the field. So I was responsible for identifying the group who would be involved. The group include Expression Australia, TAFE representatives, linguists, deaf community experts, training organisation representatives. We had ASLIA and Auslan teacher groups. So we had quite a large group. We also had to make sure we had people from WA, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. Everyone was brought together through this large group. The group had to discuss Auslan and the skills that we needed, including the linguistic components we needed to teach and the skill levels required. For example, what are the skills required at Certificate New to demonstrate if they are successful? What are the skills required for Certificate 3? And so on through the qualifications. So that was the job of that group. Skills IQ listened and documented these discussions. We met many times over a 1-year period. I was the chair of that group, which meant that my job was to facilitate those meetings with advice from Skills IQ. Now I know the language in the Auslan training package is a bit unusual and some people are frustrated by this, but the language of training packages is something we can't control. They have to follow the competencies, skill-based training requirements. We need to show a skill which is a bit strange because we are talking about a language, but under the training package system, that is the way it works. We have no control over that. So it means teachers have to accept this and interpret what the requirements mean. That is the role of the teacher to do that. Part of the challenge of teaching, and one of the nice things, is being creative in how we teach in order to achieve the goal or the skill. Also, being part of a national system, it means teachers across Australia can collaborate to decide on the best interpretations based on your best knowledge at that time. It doesn't have to be perfect. You need to make sure the students have the right outcome to meet the community and employer needs. Teachers must also be thinking about what the community wants. What are those skills? What should Auslan students be able to demonstrate to help the deaf community? What do employers need from staff who can use Auslan? So fluency, the right register. What people might want to become interpreters. They need that pathway as well. So your job as a teacher is to interpret that. The training package was developed following the government language. That's the challenge we have. So through that process, we made many revisions and corrections until we had something that was correct. Everyone agreed, the linguists, community experts, TAFE representatives, everything was agreed. So we were all quite pleased. But one more step was required. Skills IQ needed to conduct a national consultation. They flew to New South Wales, Queensland, WA, Adelaide. They shared the training package and asked for feedback. What people liked, disliked, their feedback. This feedback was collected nationally and some more changes were made. Again, we were excited and thought we had a training package, but no, there was yet another step. So when the training package had been completed, remember I mentioned the industry reference group. That was the group that knew nothing about Auslan, but they still needed to validate the training package. They validated the training package based on community consultations. They had to know that which experts were involved in the development and consultation stage, and that all of this had been completed. All the evidence was submitted to the industry reference group. They read through everything and made sure it met requirements, and they approved the training package. We were very pleased. Then there was one more step, just going back a step. We have a national system with the Commonwealth looking after all training packages. When a new training package is developed, all state governments must also agree to adopt the training package. They have to accept that it meets their needs. So the Auslan training package had to be given to each state quality framework body. At that time, Victoria had the Victorian Skills Commissioner. So the Commissioner received the training package, read through it, shared it with his team in order to decide if it would be approved or not. New South Wales similarly had their equivalent organisation to go through the process of discussion. This happened across Australia, and that was a challenge because remember, these people don't know anything about Auslan. They also want to make sure that they generate employment opportunities. The challenge we had was that in the training package we said we wanted only deaf teachers. They had the skills, it was their culture and language. We felt deaf people were best to teach Auslan, but some states were concerned about this. They were worried about hearing people losing their jobs. They thought people like coders could teach Auslan. Or hearing people who learned Auslan could help grow the pool of teachers rather than limiting it to just deaf people. So we did a lot of negotiating. Around Australia. But in the end, we lost that battle because one or two states completely disagreed. It's important to remember you have to negotiate and things are rarely perfect. So that was one thing we had to change. But finally, we had a training package. So when all the states agreed, the package went up to the AISC, the Australian Industry Skills Council. The organisation now has a new name, the National Skills Committee, I think, but at that time it was the AISC. They received many different packages which they have to read and approve. So that was the final approval on behalf of the Minister for Education at the Commonwealth level. So it was the Minister who finally signed off on the training package. So finally, everyone could use the training package to teach Auslan. So that was quite a challenging process. We had to push as hard as we could to get the best product. We had a lot of great advice from Skills IQ because they knew the barriers we would have. So they questioned us to help think about what was important. We argued, we disagreed, but they knew what the Commonwealth government would say. From that, I think we got the best product for the time. So that was the process. Now we have the Cert 2, 3, 4 and Diploma. I think it was around... I think it was around 2018 that it was approved. It used to be that after 5 years, there would be a mid-period review for each training package. There should be. But you have to prove there is a need for an upgrade. The training organisation cannot be the one to do that. But you have to prove there is a need for an upgrade. Training organisations cannot be the ones who do that. Why is that the case? RTOs teach the program and they have a vested interest in delivering training. So a government would see a conflict of interest because RTOs receive money and they employ staff to do their job. RTOs therefore have a bias to make sure that happens. The best people to advocate are the community employers like Expression Australia, Deaf Connect, Deaf Australia, Deaf Victoria, or people from the community who can make submissions and show that Auslan training package doesn't meet my needs. I'm not getting the best interpreters, the best people with Auslan skills. That's where we can argue and ask for change. That's why there is an interesting division. The problem we have in Australia is that many deaf people are involved in teaching Auslan. They can't advocate for change, so we need to find a way around to get the change that we want. And this takes time. The Auslan training package has passed the 5-year mark now. This is a good time to lobby the Commonwealth for a review. It's really important to do that because you can't have the same training package forever. And without a prompt, the government won't look at Auslan because it's not their big priority. It's only a small community. They're focused on things like transport, warehousing, where the big money is, and growth industries like climate change. That is where their focus is. Auslan is a small player until someone says you're not doing enough. Then the Commonwealth will take notice. If it causes a problem for them, they will act. But until they see a problem, they'll assume everything is going okay. There are a few things I believe we could do. Firstly, we know deaf teachers need the Cert 4 in TAE. We also know teachers do the Diploma of Auslan. I think it's worth advocating for a special Auslan teacher qualification that combines the best of both qualifications. On their own, neither of these qualifications give teachers the right skills to manage. I think if you advocate the government and possibly to the people you know in Skills IQ, we could ask them how to go about it. Who would we need to speak to? What's the best advice you can give us? What's the approach we need to take? They will give advice as best as they can. That's one strategy. It is worth doing this because it might help teachers to understand the training package and to manage better than they have up to now. We have strong hearing students, English their first language, and they will challenge some of our cultural approaches. I think deaf teachers can become quite intimidated by those students. So we need a strong qualification that is culturally appropriate, meets the needs of the teachers in terms of linguistics, etc., all in the one qualification. That will help us reduce some barriers. The other thing with the 5-year review of Auslan, there is a new language, better research in the linguistics of signed languages. We need to look at that and how to improve teaching skills. The best way to do that, I think, is to set up a committee of interested people. You can be teachers of Auslan in your own time, but you can't do it under your employer. So Melbourne Polytechnic can't argue on your behalf. People who have the skills could lobby the government or through an advocacy organisation, whichever you think is the best way, or through industry or teacher groups. The benefit is that it will force the government to provide funding for the review. Then, under the new skills system, which I think is changing this year, we have to find the right people again. My best advice is to find people who can be your ally in this industry. Without those allies, you will never get what you want. Unfortunately, that means hearing people who can't sign but are experts in their field. Once they understand your problem, they will help. At the same time, when I was trying to find who I needed to talk to, a man named Andrew, who was hearing and couldn't sign, was on the committee I had. And he became my best advocate because he knew the networks and who to talk to. I took his advice over time, I developed a network, and they started to understand the issues. That helped me a lot. You can't advocate successfully by only making demands or complaining because people won't listen. You will be blocked. You need to have a good relationship. The hearing way, you have to accept that because we are in a hearing world. It's the way of the world at the moment. We can't change that. We have to accept that and get what we want. So that's my advice. And get a person who has strong English skills to write and make your arguments for you.